Hand tools have a wide variety of purposes, from a carving gouge to a standard bench chisel, maybe something like our awl or my spindle gouge in turning. You also have skews and scrapers. You can even have something like a beauty brush. But all tools seem to have a very common layout. We have a nice wood handle. We use wood because it absorbs the moisture in our skin, so as we're using it all day long, we won't get blisters and stuff. And it's got some nice gripping textures. We have whatever the tool is going to be, but the most underappreciated part of all tools seems to be the ferrule. So today let's talk about the ferrule, how manufacturers insert them, how you can repair them. You might replace them, or if you're making a tool of your own, install one. Now, a ferrule's purpose is basically to keep the tool from self-destructing. And they've been using ferrules since the Stone Age. It's just they used to use rope and stuff like that. You see, wood, despite what we think, is actually very weak. I mean, it splits along the grain all the time. And tools like this spindle gouge right here, where the cutting action is pushing down on the tip and it's pivoting off of it, well, there's a torque action that's trying to split the wood in half, and it could easily split along the grain. If you have something that holds the wood together along its grain, you can dramatically increase its strength. In fact, I have my spindle gouge right here, which I've been using and abusing for about a year now, and you can see it's developed a split right there. That happened almost the day I made this thing, but the tool has remained functional ever since because of the ferrule holding it together, preventing it from splitting more. But without a ferrule, tools like your chisels, we have this tang that goes in here, and those tangs are somewhat triangular. So whenever you pound down, that triangle is trying to split the wood. The ferrule prevents that one. That way you can pound on this thing as hard as you want. You can mushroom the end with the biggest amount you can, and more than likely the wood will not fail on you. A socket chisel actually does the same kind of thing, except the ferrule is on the outside, so no matter how hard you pound on it this way, it keeps the wood from splitting apart. A lot of knives do the same way, and they can do different shapes. I will tell you, Bridge City Toolworks, that's one of the coolest things that they do on their tools, is they have these custom ferrules for pretty much everything that just fits so elegantly. It's really, really nice. But the downside of ferrules is they are metal and these are wood. And ferrules can fail. For example, I have this awl right here where all the time this is coming off, and I have to press it back in, which eventually will just lead this thing to entirely failing whenever it separates out just a little bit, which it's already starting to fail, and this is just done with hand pressure. I imagine if I twisted it right now, I would split it in half, but I need this tool, so I won't do that. Now, manufacturers have been doing stuff for centuries to prevent even a loose ferrule from coming off. Commonly, they will take a simple metal punch. You place it right on the middle, and then with a good whack, you actually dent the ferrule into the wood so it cannot rotate anymore. So if you have a ferrule that's coming loose quite a bit, that's an easy solution, and this is locked in for life. In fact, some of the most expensive tools out there in the wood turning world, guess what they do? They put the little punch. Here's a Robert Sorby, here's a $100 Pinnacle, and guess what? They punched it. And really, the only reason you should have to do that one is if you didn't make the fit right from the beginning. Now, you do have to give manufacturers a little bit of slack there, because unless you get that tenon to perfectly fit in the mortise, which is basically what a ferrule is, a mortise without the bottom, it will fit loose. And you know, if you are a manufacturer out of Houston, which is really humid, and you sell a turning tool with a nicely fitting ferrule that you did there to somebody in New Mexico, where it's a lot drier, well, the tool handle itself will shrink and that will become loose. And I think that's why most manufacturers kind of nick it in order to, as a safety net. But you can do it very well. And I do know some people that will actually use epoxy to fill any gaps they have in there as kind of a last little safety net. Me personally, I make and use them in the same environment, so I just go for the perfect fit. And there are many ways you can do that one. I published a video about a year ago of making my ultimate spindle gouge. It's just a really long gouge. It's a single purpose tool. And I showed you something I've been doing for probably 4 or 5 years now. I don't know if anybody else that was doing it ahead of time, but it's such a simple idea I imagine somebody had. Because even though this brass or copper is soft, it is a metal. And you can put an edge on metal. So my logic was, why not just put a burr on it, make it really, really sharp, and let it shave its way down? I can't imagine a more perfect fit. But I am one of those advocates, and you'll hear it time and time again from me, that knowledge is transferable. You learn something from one area, there's no reason why you couldn't apply it to another area. That's why it's always good to drill down in a certain subject. If you want to get into woodworking, if you are to really get into carving with hand chisels and hand tools, well, whenever you transition to using power tools, routers, and table saws, all of a sudden grain direction will make a lot more sense to you because you've really drilled down. You can apply the knowledge you had from one area to the other. Well, I was going across a metal bridge last week, going across expansion joints, wondering how they figured out how much of it to do based on metal expansion contraction with just temperature. Wood expands with humidity, metal expands with temperature, and a little light bulb popped off. Let's try using heat to get an even better fit on a ferrule. Okay, so I have a brass pipe coupler right here. It's smooth on the inside, it's got some threads on the outside. I like using brass because I can cut it on my lathe fairly easily. And I'm going to turn this into my ferrule. So I need to fit the inside, the tenon to it precisely to this size. Or do I? And that's the key thing. I'm actually going to make the tenon a tad bit thicker than this coupling right here. So the inside of this coupler is right at 13/16. And I am taking it on the non-burr side, because you know these things have a burr on one side and no burr on the other. The non-burr side. So 13/16, I'm going to make my tenon a tad bit bigger than that. So I've cut my tenon so this thing will not go on it. It is a 64th or maybe a tad bit less than a 64th of an inch too big for this brass fitting. That's at room temperature. And metal expands when it gets hot, so let's add a little bit of heat to it and see if we can get it to expand just that little bit so it will fit over the tenon, and then when it cools back down, it'll shrink onto it and just basically never come off because the wood fibers will be compressing out. See if it works. See if knowledge transfers. Get rid of the sawdust. I'm going to have to let this cool down quite a bit. You can still hear it sizzling. I got it way too hot and it slid on a lot easier than I thought. But it doesn't appear, maybe it singed it a little bit at the very beginning. We'll find out when I chop it off. But that just proves that, hey, middle school science class where we talked about bridge construction, and I remembered it as I was going over a metal bridge. Metal expands and contracts with the temperature. You can apply that even in your woodworking to ferrules. So time to finish up this tool handle, and maybe next time I try this I won't heat it up nearly as much. So for today's bonus, I want to talk about a gentleman who's pretty much written an encyclopedia of hand tool woodworking. And if you're into a lot of what people are saying on forums and in YouTube channels and stuff like that, a lot of our knowledge can be traced back to this gentleman. And a lot of people just don't know about him. He literally did write the equivalent of an encyclopedia about this information. But before we get there, if you like this video, please do me a favor. Like, favorite, subscribe, do all those social medias. And if you want to patronize the list a little bit more, please visit wortheffort.com, where I write a blog, which I just published one on common questions I get for working art markets just today. And I also have an online store where I sell a lot of swag, t-shirts, hats, all that kind of stuff, and all those sales really do support this channel and allow me to buy material to do videos like this. Graham Blackburn, if you don't know this gentleman, you need to look him up and look up his book specifically. I'll put some links down below to him. He has written a book, 3 books. It is a complete set. The first one talking about traditional hand woodworking tools. The second one diving deep into techniques, and the third one he titled Instruments and Devices, and he goes a lot more in detail on a lot of the appliances we use with hand tools, sharpening, cutting, joinery, jigs, all that kind of stuff. And what I can appreciate about this book series is he has not only done all the research, but he did all the hand illustrations, all that kind of stuff. I can't imagine the amount of work he put into this series. So, Graham Blackburn, look him up. You will really enjoy what you find.